In this video, we're going to be talking about what many people call the sunshine vitamin, and for good reason. But as easy as it sounds to get plenty of, about 2/3 of the population is deficient in it. And for as little as it's talked about and understood, vitamin D is actually very important to have plenty of. So let's talk through a little science so that you go away more informed. And of course, let's talk about what's in it for you so that you're more interested in getting the most beneficial levels of vitamin D you need. Let's go. Welcome and thanks for tuning in. My name is Marcus Bailey, and it's my goal to help as many people as possible not only make the decision to take control of their health and their wellness, but to provide tips and resources so that the health journey that you take is more enjoyable and easier to stick to long term. Before we dive into the vitamin D discussion, let me make this disclaimer. The content in this video is for information only. Even though we're just talking about an essential vitamin and not a controlled drug or prescription medication, consult your physician if you have questions, concerns, or for dosage recommendations to fit your personal needs and conditions. I feel like that makes you want to listen even more now. So let's move on to the content. I'll move through it in the following order so that if you only have a few minutes to stick around, you'll still get something out of it. First, I'll cover vitamin D itself and how our body makes it. Then I'll go through just a few of the major functions of vitamin D in the body. Finally, I will really break down why if you live in the United States and are not supplementing, you're almost statistically guaranteed to be deficient in vitamin D. If you want to stick around for a few minutes after that, I'll go through some data, facts, and information that contribute to making this vitamin one of the things that I take on an everyday basis. So for starters, vitamin D is not really a vitamin. It's a prohormone. Prohormones are substances that the body converts to a hormone that is absorbed along with fat in the diet and can be stored in the body's fat tissues, which is why it's called fat soluble. Water soluble vitamins like C, B6, B12, and others dissolve in water so that they can easily be absorbed into tissues and used. But they cannot be stored like fat soluble vitamins, which is why you get that glow in the dark pee after you pop those multivitamins. So back to vitamin D. Even though small quantities of it can be obtained from food, the primary source, excluding supplements, is from exposure to the sun, specifically the UVB rays from the sun. All right, that's enough. In the presence of those UVB rays, a form of vitamin D3 called cholecalciferol is synthesized from cholesterol in the skin. The liver converts cholecalciferol to calcidiol, which is then converted to calcitriol in the kidneys. This is now the active form of the vitamin in the body. So out of that whole process, just keep the part about the UVB rays in the back of your mind. And after I talk about a few key functions of vitamin D, I'll expand on that to explain why most of us are deficient in the United States. Why is vitamin D important in our body? Vitamin D receptors are present in most cells and tissues within our body, which is an indication that there's a very long list of things that it does and facilitates. But we will only talk about 3 in this particular video. One of the most important functions of vitamin D is the maintenance of calcium and phosphorus levels in the blood. It benefits bone health by promoting absorption of these minerals. So for starters, if you don't have enough vitamin D, calcium absorption may be insufficient and unable to satisfy the body's needs. So in adults, having soft bones is a condition called osteomalacia. Weak bones can lead to osteoporosis. So not to get too deep in that, but I just never heard the vitamin D side of the equation before. Only calcium. And even that was only for the purpose of trying to get people to buy and drink. Well, never mind. We'll talk about that in another video. So, function number 1, calcium and phosphorus absorption for bone health and strength. Next, according to loads of peer-reviewed studies and published research, vitamin D is necessary for the proper functioning of your immune system, which is your body's first line of defense against infection and disease. It has both anti-inflammatory and immunoregulatory properties and is crucial for the activation of immune system defenses. Vitamin D is known to enhance the function of immune cells, including T cells and macrophages that protect your body from pathogens. In fact, low levels of vitamin D have been associated with susceptibility to infection, disease, and immune-related disorders. According to studies, low vitamin D levels are associated with an increased risk of respiratory diseases, including tuberculosis, asthma, and COPD. Plus, deficiency has been linked to decreased lung function, which may affect your body's ability to fight respiratory infections. So, number 2 is immune system function. But a reminder, if you have any concerns or symptoms of of any of these things, please consult your physician. And finally, in addition to the previous functions we've discussed, vitamin D has been shown to activate genes that release neurotransmitters like dopamine and serotonin that affect brain development and function. Researchers have found vitamin D receptors on a handful of cells located in the same regions of the brain that are linked with depression. So think about seasonal affective disorder, a mood disorder featuring depressive symptoms that occurs during the dark times of the year when there is relatively little sunshine, coinciding with the sudden drop in vitamin D levels in the body, or even places known to have frequent overcast and cloudiness. Several studies have suggested that the symptoms of seasonal affective disorder may be due to changing levels of vitamin D3, which may affect serotonin levels in the brain. So even though we never had the data or the details to prove that the sun was good for our mood or our attitude, we always just kind of knew inside that it was important. Please note that this is not a suggestion that introducing vitamin D is at all a replacement for professional psychological help. Vitamin D supplementation may improve mood, but depression has a myriad of causes that this information is not intended to address. So there's contribution number 3, mood. If you live in the United States, this next part is particularly important for you to hear. Remember that part earlier about UVB rays being the key to kicking all this vitamin D production off? Let's quickly explore that and see if we can identify why most of us don't get enough vitamin D without supplementation. And this won't be a science class, but it is important that you have some context so that this all makes sense. The short story about sunshine is that it contains multiple types of ultraviolet light, A, B, and C. UVA accounts for about 95% of the sun's radiation that reaches the Earth's surface. We're not going to spend any more time on UVA than that. Now, unless you're near the equator, which is a latitude of 0 degrees, the amount of UVB light that you're exposed to is only limited to certain months of the year, and within those months, certain times of day. So with a wide range of latitudes in the United States being between, say, 30 degrees and 50 degrees, the exposure over time to the UVB rays of the sun looks something like this over the course of a year. And this is data provided by the EPA. January, February, March, April. At this point, you can see how the green moves north and the orange and red start to come across the map, showing that more potential exposure is becoming available as the summer months go by, and the ability of UVB rays to do its part in the production of vitamin D increases. Now, as we approach October, November, you see the shift back to virtually no potential for natural vitamin D production in the skin based on exposure to the sun. I thought it was important to share this because if you think taking a walk in the park in Philadelphia in October is having any impact on your vitamin D levels, you're misleading yourself. Enjoy the outdoors for sure, but don't count on it to get what you need from a vitamin D perspective. Wrapping all this up, let's go through a few data points that show why it's so important for you to supplement vitamin D, why this is something that I faithfully supplement, and let's look at some health patterns and trends that you could potentially reduce your chances of falling into. The first important thing to know is that complexion of your skin influences the rate at which you produce vitamin D when you are exposed to the right spectrum of sunlight. In short, and I mean short because there's enough here for a separate video, the melanin in the skin serves as a regulation mechanism to ensure that those who are ancestrally from an equatorial zone produce vitamin D at a lower rate because of their constant exposure. And people with fairer skin are able to produce more in a shorter amount of time because of their limited exposure as you move to northern latitudes. The second thing, which builds on the first, is how much vitamin D do you really produce? If you're fair-skinned, as an example, experts say that going outside for 10 minutes in the midday sun in shorts and a tank top with no sunscreen will give you enough UVB exposure to produce about 10,000 international units of vitamin D. International units, or IU, is the measurement for vitamin D as opposed to milligrams or micrograms used to measure other vitamins and minerals. That scenario should sound reasonable enough for everyone to agree on. 4 days a week with only about 10 minutes in the sun at the right time gives you about 40,000 IU vitamin D that week. I don't think anyone would say that that's way too much sun. The third thing is about supplementation. Knowing that only during certain months of the year and only during certain times of day during those months will you get exposure to the UVB rays you need, there is a definite need for supplementation. supplementation. And although there are processed foods that are fortified with vitamin D2, you still have to consume processed foods in order to get that vitamin D2. And if your body prefers to make D3 for its own use, let's assume that's what your body prefers to operate with. So I'm not prescribing or instructing you to take any specific dosage, but based on the numbers we shared in the previous part about actual production, I personally take 5,000 IU of vitamin D3 every day without fail. And yes, there are vegan versions of vitamin D3 available. And almost all the supplements you will find will be in small capsules that include a drop of coconut oil or vegetable oil because, again, it's fat soluble and is more easily absorbed when packaged that way, just like your skin packages UVB with cholesterol. So my final item before we wrap all this up is that there is evidence that suggests a relationship between the latitude and climate of zones throughout the world and prevalence of all the things we talked about. We've talked about quite a bit already, so I'm not going to open up a whole new section of videos to go deep into those, but I'm simply saying that knowing all of this, I am really surprised every day to hear how few people really know about vitamin D and its importance to the body. I'm not suggesting any cure, immunization, or guarantee for any condition, but I have personally seen enough information, studied enough of the benefits, and felt that it was very important to share with you that adequate levels of vitamin D are critical to your overall health, your immune system, and so many other functions of the body that I'll use other videos to dive deeper into. I really hope that was helpful and not bogged down with too much detail. I always want to make sure the information that you get here is simple and straightforward, but I also want to balance that out with real terminology, real data, and anything that you may want to use to spin off and do any validation or research on your own. If you did find value in this video, please consider subscribing if you haven't already. Make sure that you're getting notifications so that you can keep all aspects of your health in focus: meals, movement, and mindset. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.